If you ever want to know what it feels like to watch 100 years of family history get wiped out in half a minute flat, let me just say, there's nothing quite like seeing your grandfather's photo still sitting on the mantle while a bulldozer tears through your childhood living room. And the person who signed the demolition order does it with less emotion than someone crossing off a grocery list. That's how the Willowbrook Estates HOA operates: cold, clinical, and utterly heartless. The worst part, they thought I'd just roll over and accept it. But they didn't know the secret I'd been sitting on, and honestly, neither did I. Not until that last board cracked and the dust started to settle. The day it happened, I was still walking around my house like a ghost. My grandpa's funeral had been 3 days ago, and I couldn't bring myself to box up his things just yet. I kept picturing him tough as nails, stubborn, the kind of man who always said, "Justice takes its time, but it always shows up." I guess he'd be proud to know that's exactly what happened, but not before it all went sideways. The letter from the HOA was waiting for me the morning after the funeral. Heavy paper, bold letters, and that pretentious logo, Willowbrook Estates Homeowners Association. I read it 3 times, just hoping the words would change. My home failed to meet aesthetic standards, and according to a brand new bylaw, any house over 50 years old that didn't fit their modern vision could be torn down with 30 days' notice. What really got me? They'd passed this rule at an emergency meeting on the same day I was picking out a casket. You know what I mean? The day I'm at my lowest, they're scheming to wipe out my last link to family. I tried to fight it, pored over the HOA minutes, desperate for something, anything to use. That's when Marcus Greystone, my grandpa's best friend and the only lawyer I'd trust with my life, showed up at my door, casserole in hand and his tie already loosened. Marcus is the kind of guy who can make you feel safe or send a chill down your spine depending which side of his briefcase you're on. He dropped the casserole on my kitchen counter like he owned the place, then dropped a bomb. "We need to talk about Victoria Ravenshire, the infamous HOA president. Apparently, she'd made a hobby of squeezing out old families, snatching up their homes for pennies and flipping the properties for her luxury development pals. My house was just another domino in her grand plan. It didn't matter to her that my grandpa built this place with his own hands, or that every floorboard held memories. To Victoria, it was a blight on her vision. She'd already started making offers to neighbors using violation notices as bargaining chips. Marcus, cool as ever, told me, "You gotta document everything. Every phone call, every letter, treat this like war." He was right. I spent that night digging through Grandpa's files, looking for anything that might slow her down. That's when I found the deed. My house predated the entire Willowbrook development by almost 40 years. A loophole, maybe, but I was still searching for hope when I noticed headlights outside. There it was, the black Mercedes engine running, parked at the curb just long enough for me to see the blonde hair behind the wheel before she sped off. Victoria herself scoping out her next acquisition like a wolf. Next morning, another certified letter, this one thicker, multiple violations. My grass was 2.3 inches too tall. My fence was the wrong color, and Grandpa's ceramic fishing gnome violated decorative standards. A gnome, for crying out loud. When I called to appeal, I got a robot. When I called Victoria's office, her assistant said all communication must go through proper channels. Proper channels, my ass. Channels, my... I was just about ready to give up when Daisy May, my neighbor since I was a kid, showed up with a manila envelope and a worried look. Daisy's the kind of neighbor who brings soup when you're sick and casseroles when you're grieving. She's also the kind who's seen more than people realize. Inside the envelope, leaked HOA emails and printouts. Phase 2, acquisition, legal strategies for resistant homeowners. Turns out Victoria wasn't just ruthless, she was orchestrating a takeover targeting homes like mine for demolition and redevelopment long before Grandpa ever got sick. But the real twist hit me like a punch. Buried in the emails and planning documents, I kept seeing references to the Golden Stallion Ranch. Victoria's pride and joy, the multi-million-dollar racehorse operation that anchored her wealth. And suddenly it clicked. 3 years back, I'd been hired anonymously to design the most complex water system in the county for a private ranch. The specs were wild, high-pressure irrigation, pressure washing for stables, recreational features, and they paid top dollar, no questions asked. That water system, it ran straight through my family's property. Victoria's whole empire literally depended on the pipes I laid and the software I coded. The more I read, The more I realized she didn't just want my house for the land, she needed it to control the water. That night, as I sat at Grandpa's old desk piecing it all together, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Nice property. Shame if something happened to it. Attached a photo of my house close enough to see the crack in the front step. I sent everything to Marcus, who shot back. This changes everything. Don't respond. I'll file an injunction. But Victoria wasn't playing around. Next morning, the sun wasn't even up when 3 bulldozers, a demolition foreman, and 2 security goons rolled into my driveway. They waved a court order, supposedly from Judge Harrison, at me, then barged in and started yelling about immediate demolition. I was still in my boxers, barely awake, when Marcus called and told me to stall. Something's wrong with that order, Ezra. Judge Harrison doesn't issue rulings at 5:30 a.m. But the demolition crew didn't care. The guy in charge just said, "We're paid by the job, not the hour," and told his guys to start the engines. And that's when I snapped into fight mode. I started live streaming. Hey, Internet, I'm Ezra Blackwood, and this is my grandfather's house about to be demolished by a company with what looks like a fake court order. The comments rolled in, shares exploded, and within 10 minutes, thousands of people were watching. It slowed them down, but not enough. The bulldozer hit the porch, and I only had time to grab Grandpa's portrait, his metal box, and a handful of photos before the living room wall came down. The portrait, his army photo from 60 years ago, fell and shattered on the concrete. I dropped to my knees in the driveway, surrounded by splintered wood and broken glass, feeling like I was 7 years old and the world had just fallen apart. That's when Lily Chen arrived. She's the kind of blogger who puts crooked politicians in jail and runs into trouble when everyone else is running away. Lily started filming grilling the demolition guy on camera, and pretty soon he was sweating bullets, especially when she asked about insurance and whether they had the right paperwork. But it was too late. By the time Marcus arrived with a real injunction, all that was left of my house was a pile of debris. But Daisy May was right there, handing me a wooden box Grandpa had left for me in case anything ever happened. Inside, USB drives with backups of every water system I'd ever designed, including the Golden Stallion Ranch, administrative passwords, and another note from Grandpa: water always finds its way. Sometimes it needs a little help. I spent that night at a Starbucks poring over system schematics. The irony was bitter. Victoria had built her empire on my designs, my software, my family's land. Her whole luxury ranch depended on a network that I controlled. She'd even started selling water to other ranchers, turning my grandfather's legacy into her own private utility company. Next came the threats. Another text, this one showing Lily's house and a warning: "Stop digging or you'll regret it." She'd gotten calls, too, telling her to back off. Instead, she set up a meeting with Jake Morrison, a former employee at the ranch, who showed up at a diner with a folder full of documents and a look that said he hadn't slept in weeks. Jake confirmed everything. Victoria's plan wasn't just about homes. It was about locking down all the water rights in 3 counties, then selling access to developers and big agriculture. She was even exporting horses to Dubai and Saudi Arabia, negotiating with California and Florida developers for a massive resort complex. Then came the most damning evidence, a recording Jake made during his firing. Victoria talking openly about emergency demolitions, accelerating acquisitions, and her cozy relationship with Judge Harrison. Bribery, threats, the works. The corruption was so deep it made my stomach turn. But what really lit the fuse was realizing every valve, every sensor, every drop of water on her land was at my mercy. All I had to do was pull out my phone and press a button. The lawsuit landed the next morning. Victoria was suing me for $2 million defamation, interference, emotional distress. I almost laughed out loud. Marcus met me at his office, exhausted but fired up. He'd found evidence that this was Victoria's playbook. She'd done it a dozen times before, always with the same judge, always settling out of court, always ruining families and walking away richer. But now, with public pressure, leaked emails, Lily's investigation, and Jake's recordings, we finally had a shot. Court day was like walking into a lion's den. Victoria, surrounded by lawyers dressed to kill, looked at me like she was already celebrating. Her attorneys painted her as a saint, while I was the disgruntled contractor causing trouble. But Marcus came ready: bank records, event photos, property deeds, proof that Victoria and Judge Harrison were thick as thieves, even wedding receipts for the judge's daughter paid by Victoria's shell company. Daisy May walked in like a movie hero holding a phone with video of Victoria supervising the illegal pump installation, telling workers to make sure the old man doesn't understand what we're building. Then in the middle of the legal back and forth, my phone buzzed. All the alarms from the water system app: zero pressure, complete failure. I'd pressed the master override right before walking into court. Victoria's phone started blowing up. She tried to keep her cool, but you could see her composure crack as reports came in: 47 thoroughbred horses with no water-growing crops, dying buyers, pulling out of million-dollar contracts. She interrupted her own attorney, begging the judge for a recess to address an emergency. When pressed, she admitted on record that her whole business depended on a water system she didn't own and never had the right to use. Sheriff Tom Ironwood stood up, dropped the final bomb proof that Victoria had forged her late husband's signature, altered insurance policies, and signed contracts in his name after he was incapacitated. The judge couldn't ignore it anymore. The lawsuit was dismissed, Victoria was stripped of her water rights, and her entire operation was seized for investigation. 6 months later, I was back in a rebuilt home watching the sun rise through the same kitchen window Grandpa loved. Golden Stallion Ranch was now a community center and horse therapy program. Marcus got elected as county judge, Lily won a journalism award, Daisy became a local legend, and Victoria 18 months in minimum security for fraud and perjury, her empire gone, her reputation dust. Some days I still feel the weight of what we lost, but as I hang Grandpa's restored portrait over the new mantle, I remember his words: justice, like water, always finds a way. Sometimes it just takes someone with the guts to open the right valve. What do you think? Is it ever worth risking everything to fight back, even when the system seems stacked against you? Tell me what justice looks like in your community. Leave a comment below. And if this story struck a chord, hit that like and subscribe for more real stories of standing up when it counts.